You Make My Heart Beat Like the Rain. Written by Rachalixi. Read by Arashi. Alhaitham's relationship with peace was strained at best. The longest respite he knew was when he lived with his grandmother. Her voice was as soft as her hands, and every noise that fluttered through their home was as gentle as a page turning in a book. But that didn't last, and by the time Alhaitham was old enough to put a name to his condition, he was not alone in the knowledge. People left him alone more often than not, and when he was made to be in rooms with others, he had his earpieces to drown out the worst of the noise. This worked for him for a long time, but then Kaveh moved in with him, and he became the acting grand sage. And suddenly, his world was fuller than it had ever been. Kaveh always talked about his temper, but he didn't truly understand it. Alhaitham was never truly angry. He simply didn't know how to express his emotions any other way. Frustration, exasperation, annoyance. Weren't those all the same, anyways? Truthfully, things might have been simpler if he had just told Kaveh about this. He almost had on several occasions. But in an overwhelming twist of fate, he actually cared about what Kaveh thought of him, unlike anyone else. He didn't want Kaveh to think any worse of him than he likely already did, especially now that he was planning on asking him for a favor. Alhaitham wasn't too proud to admit when he genuinely needed help. If he truly thought he could accomplish something on his own, he would. But as he stares down at his broken earpieces, he resigns in the knowledge that he can't fix them himself. He had lasted all day without them, after discovering that they weren't working when he woke up, and while he would have preferred to have his crutch, he knew that he wasn't incapable of living without them. As Alhaitham trudged up to his front door, he was achingly reminded that simply living was the bare minimum. After a day of shrill voices in meetings, heavy footsteps against the pristine floors of the academia, and children's shouts as he was walking home, he was left utterly exhausted. Something in his chest was beating at him in warning, but he ignored it. He was home now, and it was no use dwelling on things that were beyond his control. Home. His heart pangs once more as he enters the door, the place where Kaveh was sitting at the dining table and tinkering away at his latest project. "Could you fix these for me?" Alhaitham says in lieu of a greeting, pulling the earpieces off of his head. He had worn them all day, despite their lack of functionality, hoping that they would provide at least some solace. "Oh, did you break them?" Kaveh asks, and the wheels already turning in his brain as he took in the delicate objects. He took them from Alhaitham gently and continued speaking without waiting for an answer. "I was actually thinking about some modifications I could make to them. Should I run them by you first?" "Kaveh," Alhaitham sighs, slightly bemoaning, for the uncountable time that day, the loss of his earpieces. He recognizes that this behavior, ignoring Kaveh's questions and demanding things of him, was what the older constituted as rude, but Alhaitham could make up for it later, when his head wasn't threatening to burst. He squeezes his eyes shut and falls into the chair beside Kaveh, willing and failing to make his muscles relax. "Can I have silence for a few minutes? Please. Does living with me cause you such suffering that you are in pain simply from me being in the same room as you? You came in and asked me for something, and you won't even talk to me!" Kaveh demands, leaning forward into Alhaitham's space. Alhaitham craves the older's proximity, but his voice was grating him down so far that he fears he would soon be left frayed open and bleeding. "Maybe going without the earpieces for a while will do you some good." "Kaveh, it's not you that causes me pain," he said simply, pressing the pads of his fingers into his temples, so hard that he sees white around the edges of his vision. "Then what? You can't tell me this is normal." Kaveh stands, and the legs of the chair scrape against the wooden floor. And Alhaitham breaks. His head thunks into the heels of his hands, and he leans forward, a strangled sound that was aching to be a scream ripping from his throat as he let out the frustrations that he had been keeping inside all day. Haytham? Kaveh's voice is a whisper now, his words coming out hesitant as he hovers over Alhaitham, scared to touch him. Sounds, he grunts out, and though the room was quiet now, the scraping sound was echoing through his head and scratching painfully at the inner walls of his skull. All of a sudden, his hearing whites out, and all he can absorb is blessed, rolling static. His palms black out his vision as he rides out the first incident he's had like this in a long time. A small part of him is grateful that it happened at home, with only Kaveh to witness, away from the prying eyes and whispers of the academia. He barely registers Kaveh's frantic pushing of his shoulder, his body too stimulated to account for any sensory input other than the rushing in his ears. He feels his mouth open, and he knows that words are coming out, but he has little knowledge of what it is that he is saying. The older man helps him to stand, and all but carries him to his bedroom, and by the time his head hits his pillow, he is gone. Alhaitham wakes in a more peaceful way than he has in a long time. His senses come back one by one, the scratch of his blanket against his skin, followed by the orange hues of sunlight hiding his eyelids, and sound was the last to come into focus. He braces himself for the impact, but finds that he didn't need to. All that hits his ears is distant chirping of birds outside, and gentle breezes hitting the windows. He rises slowly and reaches for his earpieces blindly, forgetting for a moment that he had given them to Kaveh to fix. His heart drops when he remembers Kaveh, a horrifying mixture of guilt and embarrassment taking over his body all at once. He freezes when his hand meets delicate metal and wiring instead of empty air. His earpieces are resting on his bedside table, where he usually keeps them, polished and repaired, beside a note that commands him to be more careful with them. His fingers tremble a bit as he puts them on, and a breath of relief rushes out of him when he is met with peaceful silence. He switches them off as he leaves his bedroom, trying to decide what he could possibly say to Kaveh to account for what happened the previous day. He shuts his bedroom door as he always does, slow and meticulous, but the telltale thunk of the wood against the doorframe doesn't hit his ears. His eyes flicker across the span of the door in surprise to find some kind of padding adorns the border of the wood. He opens and closes the door experimentally, something settling inside of him happily when it does not make a sound. A quick glance down the hallway shows that the rest of the doors have similar padding around the edges, something that definitely was not present just hours ago. He finds Kaveh at the same table he had been at last night, caressing Marak and whispering things to her. A rush of fondness takes over, and Alhaitham has to wipe his face clean when Kaveh notices his presence in the room. Alhaitham, look! Kaveh sounds excited, but his voice remains soft, tickling Alhaitham's ears in a soft embrace. I made some changes to Marak. She's now new and improved. Listen! Marak comes to life with a wave of Kaveh's hand, and she voices her hello, her pixelated face looking as jovial as the first time Alhaitham had met her. Her welcoming beeps were melodious, sifting through the air like a wind song. Did you do the doors too? Alhaitham asks, knowing the answer, but wanting confirmation nonetheless. Yes, Kaveh nods fervently, dismissing Marak, and giving Alhaitham his full attention. And I installed hinges on the cabinets to stop them from closing harshly, as well as cushions on the chairs to keep them from scraping. If there's anything else you can think of, let me know. Kaveh, Alhaitham starts, uncharacteristically out of words to say. Here, Alhaitham was worrying over how he was going to explain himself to Kaveh, but as always, the older man understood him without words being needed. Did you sleep? No. Kaveh is sheepish, the dark circles under his eyes deepening when he attempts to crinkle his eyes in a smile. It's all right, though. I'll catch up on sleep tonight. You know that catching up on sleep isn't real. Alhaitham steps closer to him, reaching for Kaveh's chin, so he could tilt his head up to meet eyes with him. Ugh! Kaveh's voice comes out raspy, and he clears his throat, his eyes flickering back and forth between Alhaitham's pupils. What are you doing? You did all of this for me, Alhaitham says, more than asks, wheels in his head turning in pursuit of finding out how to best express his gratitude. You didn't have to. I know that. Kaveh smiles. A soft, genuine thing. I wanted to. You let me live here. The best I can do is make it comfortable for you. No? That's not... Alhaitham trails off, frowning as he releases his grip on Kaveh's face. He misses the touch immediately, and he presses his fingers against his pants to distract the urge to reach out again. You don't owe me anything. A chorus of, he knows you're different and he pities you, and he'll never look at you the same way, swims around Alhaitham's head, and he grits his teeth against the onslaught. Besides rent? Kaveh jokes, his entire face softening when he takes in Alhaitham's discomfort. Haitham, I care about you. I wanted to do this for you because I don't want you to be in pain. Okay? I am not an invalid, Alhaitham informs him, not unkindly. I can manage just fine. Yesterday was just a bad day. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. Kaveh stands and cups Alhaitham's face in both of his hands, ensuring that he had the younger's full attention. I don't wish to see you in pain like that again. Oh. Alhaitham leans into the warmth of Kaveh's hands with a sigh, and Kaveh leans forward to press a kiss between his eyebrows. Thank you, Kaveh. Of course, Yamar. Kaveh lets him go, returning to his seat. But you must promise to tell me when things get bad instead of getting angry. I'll try. Alhaitham fights some of his instinct to build his walls back up, to not be vulnerable like this. Sometimes I don't know until it happens, though. So, those times where you tell me to stop talking? Kaveh starts, chewing on his bottom lip. Is it because you don't want to hear what I'm saying? I always want to hear you, Kaveh. Alhaitham sighs at how easily the words are leaving his chest, almost without his permission. It's just that my body doesn't allow it sometimes. We'll just have to find a way to talk that doesn't involve our voices then, Kaveh declares, like there wasn't an option in the world that didn't involve them communicating.